Welcome into the DFS Den. It's Dave Eddy here, aka Corporal Eddie on Twitter. Back for week 10 of the NFL DFS season. It just baffles me that we are, 2.5 months into this, but here we are. Where I live, it's 70 degrees out today and probably not a day above 50 for many months. So seasons are changing, and hopefully your DFS fortunes have been changing as well with these videos. So change the format up a little bit. Instead of breaking down, cash and, MME individually, I'm just going to talk about, each position, go player by player, and just let you know what category they fall into. So I'm not repeating myself, with certain players. So with that being said, let's hop into quarterbacks this week. And I don't have many that I'm interested in. There's, a lot of guys off of the main slate that we'd normally be interested in, but up at the top here, I'm looking at Patrick Mahomes coming in at $7,900 on DK going up against Jacksonville. He is a cash and a GPP option for me. He's got a middle of the road quarterback matchup against those Jets. He does have 5 straight weeks where he is at least 3x on his salary. And in 3 of those 5 weeks, he has at least 4x on his salary. So this is a guy, similar to like a Josh Allen when he's healthy, and we'll get to that later. But he's the guy that, has got a solid floor, has got a very high ceiling. So a guy that's always in play. It's just a matter of, what the other options are and, whether we're considering him or not. But, his price right now is right around where it's been all year long. So we're not having to pay a premium, at his salary this week. It's what we normally get for him. Probably going to be my cash QB this week. For GPPs, obviously, it's very easy to stack him with either Kelsey or Juju, both of which we'll get to later. Looking at Justin Fields here as well, $6,500 on DraftKings. He is a cash and GPP option for me as well. Lions are going up the 3rd most points to QBs on this slate. So great matchup for a guy that has just been consistently outperforming his previous week for the last 6 weeks in a row. 5 weeks in a row now, he has gone at least 3x on his salary. And 3 of those weeks, he has gone over 4x on his salary. Now, he did get a pretty big price bump. Like I say, he's up to $6,500. But with this matchup especially, I think that's a price you can certainly afford. Let's talk about Tua, $6,700 on DraftKings going up against the Browns. He's going to be GPP only for me. He's got a matchup against the Browns, giving up the 7th least amount of points to QBs. So not a great matchup, but still kind of middle of the road there. Tua's had his share of 300-yard and 3 touchdown or more games, but he's also had his share of games under 300 with, a touchdown or less. So it's kind of been hit or miss a little bit, but obviously in those top weeks, Tua has broken some slates. So the question really then becomes, which end of the spectrum do you think he's going to find himself in this week? Me, personally, I'm leaning towards being underweight in those GPPs. I mean, I just expect that the Browns are going to lean heavily on that running game, give a lot of touches to Nick Chubb, which is what their mantra is. And I just expect them to run the ball, which is probably going to limit the number of plays that, the Dolphins are going to get off, which limits, to a ceiling. And then real quick, talk about Josh Allen. As of this recording, he is not ruled out yet, but I do not expect him to play this week. So even if he were to end up playing, there's just other options. I'm just not going to take the chance on Josh Allen. So a guy who typically is a no-brainer in play, just with that injury to me is I wouldn't say a no-brainer, but he's just a guy that is going to be out for me. All right, let's move into these running backs here. I'm going to start with Dameon Pierce, $6,300 on DraftKings going up against the Giants. He is a cash and a GPP play for me. Gets a matchup against pretty much middle of the road Giants defense against running backs. What isn't middle of the road, though, has been his volume. Since week 3, he's only had 1 game with less than 20 touches. And even in that game that was under, he still had 18. So no matter the game script, they're going to continue to give him carries. And he also gets enough targets in the passing game that it makes a difference. Travis Etienne, $7,100 on DraftKings against the Chiefs. He is a cash and GPP option as well. Chiefs have given up the 7th most points to running backs on this slate. Now, it isn't an elite matchup, but since James Robinson, was dealt away, Etienne has handled just insane volume. He's had 27 and 30 touches in the last 2 weeks, and that has led him to nearly 5x on his salary over that period of time. He's priced up a little bit now. He, like I said, is up to 7,100. So that makes him no longer a lock, but he still provides a ton of value and definitely a strong consideration for cash or GPP this week. Saquon Barkley, 8,600 on DraftKings going up against the Texans. He is a cash and GPP option. Highest priced on the slate as far as running backs are concerned, but by far the best matchup on the slate as well. I mean, he's got a combination of basically 20 or more guaranteed touches and a dream matchup. So I think that's just going to make him a lock for me this week in cash. Just that volume and that matchup, you really can't do much better. It's the same reason that I locked up Derrick Henry whenever he played the Texans as well. So in GPP, his salary is quite a bit prohibitive, though. If you do decide to play him, you can make it work, but it's not easy. This is, again, not another slate where, salary is not easy to come by. And speaking of Derrick Henry, he's $8,300 this week on DraftKings going up against the Broncos. I've got him as a GPP only play. Talked a lot about volume, and nobody gets the volume, sees the carries that Derrick Henry does. He only has 2 games this year where he had less than 20 carries, and he's only got 1 game under 80 yards. He's got 100-plus yards in his last 5, and he scored a touchdown in 6 of his last 7 games, and he has multiple touchdowns in 3 of those 4 games. So this guy's just getting tons of touches, getting in the end zone, getting plenty of yards. The floor is there, and so typically that would make him a really strong cash game play. But I don't think that I'm going to be able to fit in Barkley and Henry this week, even if I play Justin Fields and have a cash lineup, that's well-rounded enough that I feel like is in great shape. I'm going to see what opens up as we get into Sunday. If value opens up, then yes, I'm happy to pay up at running back big time and get those 2 workhorses in there. Otherwise, you kind of got to pick one, and I'm actually taking Barkley. Last guy I'll talk about here, Jamal Williams, $5,900 on DraftKings going up against the Bears. Cash and GPP viable for me. Bears have given up the 2nd most points to running backs this year. DeAndre Swift, definitely the superior player to Jamal Williams, but Duke cannot stay on the field. So for a team like the Lions, who want to run the ball as much as possible, they've just been leaning on Williams. And that's with or without Swift on the field, because like I said, he just hasn't been able to be out there for many snaps. So Jamal's got at least 12 touches in each game this year, and he's got 15 or more in 5 of the last 6. So it's not elite volume, but going up against, that Bears matchup, you give him a nice little boost. And $5,900, it's a pretty nice salary for a guy you could probably slide into your flex for cash. GBP, you can kind of do what you want. All right, let's head on into wide receivers. We'll start with Cooper Kupp, $9K on DraftKings. Matched up against Arizona. He's a cash and GPP option for me. Each and every week, Kupp is in play. Matchup means absolutely nothing, as I think he's been matchup proof, long enough to make it an absolute real thing in case, you hadn't believed in it yet. As always, though, it's a matter of cost when it comes to Cooper Kupp. If you play him, you're going to get enough points to pay off a salary. It's just a matter of what you can do, with the rest of your lineup. So, you love to play Kupp because it's always worthwhile, but it really makes the rest of your lineup difficult. Christian Kirk, $5,900 on DraftKings going up against the Chiefs. I consider him a cash and GPP viable play. Chiefs are giving up the 5th most points to wide receivers this year. Kirk has been up and down. He's trending up, though, here the last few weeks. And I expect that the Jags are going to have to pass to keep up with the Chiefs. And the most likely, beneficiary of that in the passing game is, I think, going to be Christian Kirk. Zay Jones is also an option, much cheaper. but you got a much better floor and a much better ceiling with Kirk. So I consider him very playable here. Tyreek Hill, $9,100 now on DraftKings, going up against the Browns. Cash and GPP viable. Kind of a middle of the road matchup here against the Browns. But Hill just been absolutely out of this world this year. Not quite as consistent as, Cooper Kupp, but pretty damn close. The difference is, though, just nobody has the ceiling that Hill does. And so I think that probably makes him a better GPP player this week than a cash player. But getting Hill in your lineups in any fashion is going to be a good idea. It's just his salary is going to be so hard to fit in this week for cash. Juju Smith-Schuster, $6K, going up against the Jags. I consider him a cash and a GPP play here as well. Jags have given up the 6th most points on this slate to wide receivers this year. And Juju, I think, has been a little bit better than you probably realize. He's had at least 8 targets in all but 2 games this year. And over his last 3 games, he's been really great. I know he's had 2 games now where he's 5X on his salary. And in those games, he's had over 100 yards receiving and a touchdown. So basically, if you think Juju scores a TD this week, he's a solid GPP play. I'm going to probably shy away from him in cash because I probably need to go a little bit cheaper at receiver than even his 6K. But he most certainly is an option for you. Amari Cooper, $6,500 going up against the Dolphins. He's a GPP play for me. Dolphins middle of the road, as far as points against wide receivers this year. Cooper, he's been scoring touchdowns pretty consistently. He's got a touchdown in 5 out of 8 games and 3 of his last 4. Very similar to Juju, to where I think that if you expect him to get into the end zone, then he makes for a very solid GPP play. And then last guy I want to talk about here is his teammate Donovan Peoples-Jones, a Michigan man, $4,300. I consider him cash and GPP viable. His salary makes him very playable. He's got a very solid floor, I would say, but probably a safer floor than anyone else within that range. He's 3X his salary for the last 5 games. Doesn't have a very high ceiling, though. He's basically getting 2-3X, and that's it, which isn't a bad thing. It's GPP playable, but his salary is not, or his points are not going to be enough to where he's going to probably break a slate just because he's never shown that ability. But he does make a nice salary saver. Probably a better play in cash, but someone you can turn to GPPs if you want to. You definitely could, spend your money, in a worse spot there. All right, let's get into these tight ends here. I'm going to start with Greg Dulcich, $3,400 on DraftKings going up against the Titans. Cash and GPP viable play. Titans basically middle of the road as far as points given up to tight ends this year. And this is the most expensive so far that we've seen Dulcich. But he still comes in low enough that, we can consider him a salary saver. He's at least 4X on his salary in each of the 3 games he's played this year. Even if he scores just the same as what he's been averaging so far this year, it is a little bit of a price increase. That's still going to be a 3X on the salary. Makes for a solid play. Probably going to be my cash game tight end. If you want to pay up, Travis Kelce is your guy. He usually is. $7,800 on DraftKings going against those Jaguars. Consider him cash and GPP viable. Kelce is one of those guys that's just matchup proof. He's always in consideration when he's on the slate as far as cash or GPP. But as it always is going to be with him, it's a matter of whether, you can pay up at tight end as opposed to, typically, our punt there. I'm not going to be able to afford him in cash this week. I just don't see the way that my player pool is going to be constructed to where I'll have the cash for him, but he certainly is in play. As far as GPPs, perfect stacking partner with Mahomes, and probably any Mahomes stack that I have will almost surely have Kelce in it. Evan Engram, $3,300 on the opposite side of the field there against the Chiefs. I consider him cash and GPP viable. Now, this is assuming he's healthy, because that is up in the air as of right now. But if so, I think he's a fine play in any format this week. Chiefs are giving up the 5th most points to tight ends this year. And prior to last week, Evan Engram was paying off his salary each of the past 4 weeks. Not anything slate breaking, but especially in cash, more than holding his own. And then lastly here, we'll talk about Foster Moreau, $3,200 on DraftKings going up against the Colts. Again, cash and GPP viable. Darren Waller has officially hit the IR, so we do not have to wait until Sunday to find out if Moreau is, available to us. We already know that he is. In my opinion, so long as his price, hovers right around where it is now, which is where it's, been sitting, he's at least in play for me for the next 4 weeks. Excuse me. His ceiling, I think, is pretty limited, though, so I do think that he's a better cash play than a GPP play, but you certainly could do worse, in GPPs if that's where you wanted to go. He still does have a nice salary, and he's got every chance to hit in 3X. I just don't know that he's going to, be a guy that can break the slate for you, which is fine. All right, finishing up here with defense special teams. Cash to me is pretty obvious this week with Josh Allen's injury. I don't think he's going to play this week. I mentioned that up above. That makes the Vikings at just $2,200 just an absolute lock for me in cash. In turn, that makes them a complete fade for me in GPP. Just never play the chalky defense in GPP. It doesn't help you. It's a terrible play. But all in all, same advice as I've been giving you here for the last little while as far as, defense special teams. Simply correlate it with one of your running backs or just use someone that's less than 5% owned and is relatively cheap. By far the most volatile position on the slate. The one position where the salary does not correlate to its price. It's just too volatile. Ideal situation, you play a defense that pairs with your running back, is cheap, and is under 5%. Usually not very many teams in that mix, but for this week, the way it sits right now for me, teams that currently would be in my player pool for GPPs that meet that criteria, we've got the Lions, we've got the Jags, and we've got the Browns. So I hope that helps you out this week. I know last week's video helped some people win some money. I appreciate them reaching out and thanking me for, the advice. I appreciate their support and tuning in and watching these videos. To help you do that, make sure you pop on over here, subscribe to the channel. You can turn on notifications so you get an alert every time a new video comes out. And then make sure you drop a like on here. And you know what? I look forward to this week, and we'll see you in week 11.